Today on Diksha, we look at the essence of religious scriptures. Now, just to clarify, when I talk about religious scriptures, I'm not speaking specifically about Hindu religious scriptures, but the essence of all religious scriptures. And let's say religious scriptures known and unknown. The reason I say known and unknown is because as human beings, there would have been scriptures from religions that have died. So, for example, the Greek and Roman religions, the Scandinavian religions, all these things where their scriptures are considered to be now folklore. And then, historically speaking, there are archaeological documents, tablets that are found that have yet to be deciphered. So I'm speaking about those scriptures as well as current scriptures that are known. So Christian and Islamic and Hindu and Buddhist and all these things, they have an essence, they have a particular nature, and they have a particular function. The function of scripture is to document life. It is a let's say a bit of a user manual for life. And as times pass and times change and the society change, the nature of the scripture and the format of the scripture will change. So for example, if we look at the past decade or the past generation, where electronic devices and household appliances came with intricate user manuals. Whereas now, some appliances and some electronics and household items come with a simple pictogram, setup manual, which is sometimes even one page. So we have gone from having complex user manuals to having very simplified user manuals. And the same thing can be said with scriptures, that the way that life changes and the way that the aspects of society changes will influence the nature or the way a scripture is formatted or laid out. Even, famously, the language of a scripture will change, because some languages are considered now to be dead languages, or languages that are no longer spoken and understood by the common people. And so, in that aspect too, the scripture will change. And there are those who will argue that there is a purity of, let's say, reading a scripture in its original language as compared to reading a translated version of a scripture, and that holds true in a certain degree. Now, the reason it holds true in a certain degree is because when something is written in its original, when it's written, that language is not only grammatical. The language of a scripture is social, as well as political, as well as economical, as well as everything, because it represents the way that the society communicates at that point in time. So, for example, if we look at this modern era, like right now, with all the acronyms and all the social media abbreviations, and this is put down, so we get a very young person who is very into social media, and they were to sit down and write about God or something about life. And we said, okay, you can use whatever language you communicate in, and you have all the language that the younger people use, and all the acronyms that they use, then that language will have a meaning to that person and people who understand that language. The whole point is that it is the way that the point is communicated. So the original language of a scripture or the original language of a text will communicate most accurately the point that is being made. It is better only because it gives the most accurate, let's say, meaning. It's not better in terms of its meaning. And we define, well, the reason for this definition is not to denounce or promote any particular language. It is to say that when trying to understand the essence of a scripture, we must understand the meaning of the scripture in terms of the essence rather than the literal meaning of the words. Because as I've just stated, a language is not only grammatical, it is cultural. So for example, if I use a particular metaphor, if I use a particular poetic reference, it will have meaning because it refers to something that is happening at that point in time culturally. But if I translate it literally, then I may be losing the essence or the meaning. So one must understand when one reads a scripture or a historical text that there must be an understanding of the social atmosphere, the social environment at that time. There must be an understanding of the political and the economical environment at that time in order to fully understand the true meaning of the language. So that is one point that I wanted to make and put aside, because that point is important for those who hold to the strict, school of thought that a scripture must be read in its original text because that is the purest form of the scripture. And I'm saying yes, but there must be the understanding of the social and all the entire culture at the point in time that scripture is written. So that point aside, we are talking about the essence of the scripture, which is why we can say, okay, well, the translated versions can be helpful and can have deep influence, because if the translated version carries the meaning and the essence of that scripture, then it is helpful, it is true. Now, what must we understand in order to grasp the essence of a scripture? We must understand that all scriptures, all documents speak about life. They speak about the trials and tribulations of life, the problems that we may face in life, and it gives the solutions that the author of the scripture will prescribe based on their knowledge and their understanding. And so it is in understanding this that I am reading something or listening to something that is about life. Now let's say, okay, well, I just mentioned that it was socially different, and so we must understand the social aspect at that point in time. In a way, that is unimportant when trying to understand the essence of a scripture. The reason it is unimportant is because, let's say I am listening to an ancient text. My understanding of the social situation in ancient times does nothing for my life because I am living in modern times. So I must understand what I'm hearing and reading in a way that relates to my life. And I must understand it in a way that is practical. So understanding the social nature of the ancient scripture is not practical to my life. I must understand the context in a modern sense. And that is where the essence of the scripture comes in. I must understand the point so that I may be able to live my life in a way that uplifts my well-being. So if I'm hearing an ancient story about, famously like Ram and Sita or Jesus Christ or Buddha, I cannot say, okay, well, this is what Jesus Christ did, so I must do the same. I mean, circumstantially, is totally different. It circumstantially, there are different options. So there can never be saying, well, logically, that I am going to do exactly as that person did. What do I need to understand is that, okay, as a person, there was a decision made. There was a situation that followed. There was consequences. There was, let's say, a reasoning. There was, let's say, a long-lasting effect. Now, in my life, if I follow the principle behind that decision, how will it affect my life? And so, well, let's say, for example, in Sanatana Dharmic principle, there identifies in the scripture, okay, the laws of karma and the laws of dharma and the laws of, let's say, sannyasin, which is celibate life, and the laws of family life, and all these things. And we look at the examples of people who, now in the scriptures, most of the time, it is people who are greater in terms of achievement than us. So they talk about kings and they talk about great scholars and saints and sages and all these things. And if I am listening to this, I will say, okay, so this great person made a particular decision. They made a particular mistake. There was a particular consequence. So if I can understand his decision or her decision, if I can understand the process, if I can understand the consequence that followed, then probably I can make a decision in my life based on their example, and I can see if I arrive at a similar consequence, at a similar destination. And so this is what we are getting at. It is simply using an example of somebody who we consider to be better than us. And by better, I mean in terms of their personal level, their psychological level, their mental level, their level of success. We look at the person and decide based on the nature of the person if it is an example we want to follow. So I know the topic has gone, it has touched on a lot of areas, and all these areas can be, let's say, delved into further. But the simple point of today's episode on the essence of the scripture is that the scripture itself is speaking about life. And so the scripture, or let's say the context of the situations in the scripture, seeks to identify major foundation, let's say pillar principles of every human being's life. So let's say the strength of a person, the weakness of a person, the ability to overcome, let's say, the ability to overcome disastrous situations. All these things, let's say, are common to every human being. And so it is an effort, by example, to show what can be the outcome. So the simple answer is that the essence of scripture is life. It is a lesson in life, and it is a guiding user manual, in a way, about life and how to be, well, successful, or at least satisfied in the outcome of our own lives. So I'd like to thank you for joining me on Diksha, right here on Sanket Television, the first Hindu TV station in Trinidad and Tobago, and your number one choice for inspirational, cultural, and spiritual programming.